Hello and welcome to the podcast. I'm John Billinger.
I'm Connor Keating.
And today we will be talking about the 1959 monster movie from Warner Brothers, Gigantis, the Fire Monster. Good movie, right?
This movie sucks.
Yeah. Alright, well anyway, some of you out there may be wondering, what the heck is a Gigantis? Well, I'll tell you what it is about. So, Gigantis the Fire Monster takes place in Japan, and it's about these two pilots who come across these two giant monsters. One of them, they are apparently both from the species Anguirus, but one of them clearly looks a suspicious bit like a certain other radioactive monster.
Looks like a dinosaur, or like a T-Rex. Dinosaur. Look at a T-Rex. And the other looks like an Ankylosaurus.
Yeah. But anyway, the T-Rex monster is called Gigantis, and these two things just hate each other's guts and just want to rip each other apart. Anyway, the two pilots go to Osaka to warn everybody, and eventually the monsters come into Osaka and wreak havoc and fight each other in the middle of the city. And well, that's kind of the basic rundown of the story. There's a lot of other subplots and other kind of things in here. Like there's a romance thing. There's a bit with some gangsters. It's a lot of stuff about the tuna fish industry in there.
It's very messy. It's such a messy film.
Yes. Now, something that we should probably address the elephant in the room when it comes to this movie, because I'm sure the people listening to this at home or in their car or in their office or wherever you're listening to this at, you probably are wondering, this movie kind of sounds like a Godzilla ripoff, and actually this movie is a Godzilla movie. So here's a bit of a rundown on the history of this movie, because the history of this movie is a little bit more interesting than the actual movie.
I would agree on that.
Yes. So in 1954, Toho, the Japanese studio, released the original Godzilla, and it was a huge hit in Japan. And naturally, they were like, sequel! So they made a sequel. They did not get Ishiro Honda to direct the sequel, though. He was busy with another Toho film called Half Human, which we might talk about one day.
If we can get a hold of it.
Well, we'll see. Anyway, so Godzilla Raids Again was released, I think, like 6 months after the first one. Yeah,
they got the guy who did The Invisible Man Appears. So that's his you did a sci-fi movie too, get in here sort of thing.
Yep. So anyway, he did Godzilla Raids Again, which in Japan I think is actually called Godzilla's Counterattack. So that's the actual Japanese translation. Raids Again was just kind of like the international title.
Yeah, probably when it was distributed by Classic Media in like the 2000s, or that's probably when. I'm not 100% sure on that, but that's probably roughly when the Classic Media DVDs.
Yes. Anyway, it was not Godzilla Raids Again was not a big hit in Japan when it came out. In fact, Toho decided to cancel their plans for a third movie called The Bride of Godzilla, which is a pretty crazy movie.
Yeah.
At least the plans for the movie were pretty crazy. Meanwhile, over in America in 1956, Godzilla was released or repackaged as Godzilla King of the Monsters, and they re-edited. This is the version where they have the scenes with Raymond Burr, and that movie was a big hit in America. You know, at the drive-ins and late night on television. So naturally, someone decided to snatch up the rights to Godzilla Raids Again. The rights of the movie were snatched up by the same producers who produced the Godzilla King of the Monsters, Raymond Burr version of the original movie. And I will never understand the logic behind their next move with this movie. But, okay, so Godzilla King of the Monsters was a huge hit for them.
Yeah.
And instead of and you have the rights to the sequel. And they were like, let's just take all the monster footage, dump all the civilian footage, film new scenes, and just make a completely new movie. And that was their original plan. It was called The Volcano Monsters. And Toho apparently shipped the Godzilla and Anguirus suit over in America so they could shoot more scenes. Apparently their idea was they were going to have it be like Godzilla and Anguirus are fighting in the middle of Chinatown in San Francisco. And they're not Godzilla and Anguirus anymore. They're just a generic T-Rex and an Ankylosaurus.
Yeah, the idea was basically, back then, was that, like, sequels had a bad reputation. You know, like...
You had the Universal movies.
Yeah, but then at the same time, the 50s Universal monster movies were Creature's Revenge and Creature Walks Among Us. Okay. So that's what I think is generally considered, like, the reason why this was not rebranded as, or why it was rebranded as not a Godzilla movie was because, you know, sequel equals bad or something like that.
The producers, they struck a deal with a company called ABPT Pictures Incorporated to finance the film and film it. Unfortunately, the studio closed down, and all their original plans for the Volcano Monsters fell apart, and they never ended up making the Volcano Monsters. And then Warner Brothers snatched up the rights to the Godzilla raids again, and they decided to dub it instead. And it's I guess it's kind of loosely connected to the original, but we'll get to that.
It's pretty similar. Well, I don't know what the original was going to be like, but it seems like, they were just scrounging together what they could to make the original Volcano Monsters. And it's worth noting that both the Godzilla and Anguirus suit, because of this whole event, they became lost. And, of course, there's no chance of them recovering them now because these suits were not made to last. I think the oldest Godzilla suits still around are like the late
2000s.
No, the late 70s. There's still Mechagodzilla and
oh, that's cool.
Mechagodzilla's still around. I know that. Only late 70s stuff is really still around, but those are not like usable. But the 2000 stuff usable. But these suits not made to last. But at the time, this company went bankrupt or whatever, and the suits became just lost.
Yeah. And to dub the movie, they featured the voice counts of Kay Luke, Paul Frees, and George Takei.
As one guy. As one screaming military guy.
I thought he plays the main character.
I don't think he does. I looked it up.
Because I remember he is always like, I had to dub a scene in Godzilla Raids Again, I know exactly, where I say banana oil.
I know exactly what...
Are you saying he's just embellishing his own role?
I think so. I know what interview you're talking about, but I'm pretty sure that his role, I was able to pick it out. It's at the very end. He's a general. He's not a general. He's just an army guy who's shouting like, "Quickly, hurry up!" And I'm pretty sure that's his entire role. I may be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure that's his role. He has a very similar role in the Americanization of Rodan, where he's just a guy shouting.
Anyway, Gigantis eventually made it on a double bill in 1959 with Teenagers from Outer Space, which we may review that one day.
It's on my 50 classic sci-fi films box that I am scared to touch.
It's okay. It's an okay movie. I've also read that apparently this movie was not allowed to be distributed on television in the 60s and 70s and 80s, but which is weird because I have a TV guide from the 60s and it's listed as the late night movie.
Huh.
So I sort of doubt the validity of that.
Yeah, I'm sure that it appeared alongside certain other Godzilla movies.
Yeah. And but yeah, so that's the rundown on the production of Gigantis the Fire Monster. What are your thoughts on Gigantis the Fire Monster? I see you have a list.
I've got a big list of notes here, and so this film, to kind of understand it, right? So you've got the originals of a lot of these films, and the originals are usually pretty good, right? Mm-hmm. The original Godzilla, King Kong vs. Godzilla, and then you get these American re-edits where it's more than just a simple dub, and they re-edit the film, they add in new stuff, they change the plot.
And if you're lucky, sometimes they didn't really do it that badly.
Yeah, some of them aren't too bad. Like Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster is not too bad, or Godzilla or Mothra versus Godzilla isn't too bad.
Except they call her the Thing.
Except they call her the Thing, but that's pretty minor. I I like Mothra, the Godzilla versus the Thing dub. But anyways, but yeah, like King Kong versus Godzilla, the original Godzilla, they're good films, but yeah, they change a lot, and so the Americanizations are vastly inferior, and quite frankly, they kind of turn them into mediocre movies. Whereas here, this falls more in line with the Americanization of like Varen, where you take an already not great film, and then you proceed to, change it, re-edit it, and suddenly you have a film. You took an already bad film and you made it even worse.
Well,
and so
Varen got the same treatment that this film would have gotten if they did the volcano monsters thing.
Yeah, yes, Varen did have. Varen was drastically different. Whereas Gigantis, the fire monster, I will say,
I'd say this is more like the Godzilla versus the Thing, where they just changed the name of the monster.
Yeah, a little bit. Though they do still call Mothra in that.
It's very confusing.
Yeah, they go back and forth. It is so weird with that film. But anyways, Gigantis. But yeah, they add quite a bit to this film. Not just the changing of the monsters' names.
They didn't shoot new scenes.
They didn't really shoot anything new.
They just had a bunch of stock footage.
Lots of stock footage. Actually, hold on a second.
I see you have like obligatory stock footage of atomic testing with narration.
Yeah,
that's how the movie starts. You hear boom, and it's like nuclear energy is affecting the world. That's how it starts.
Yeah, so this is definitely goes into the 50s monster movies that need that weird opening with military stuff that's like kind of sort of educational. Except this film, it has nothing to do with the rest of the movie. Like, if they made it over, I don't know, the Japanese tuna fishing industry, then it's like, okay, I get it. This is super boring probably, but I get it. Whereas the whole missile opening, I guess, is just very bizarre and weird. But yeah, they've got lots of they've got an opening with just Japanese workers, stock footage that's not in the original, just lots of weird stuff. And there's a scene where there's this movie that plays, right? And they're showing this movie.
Oh, they're watching the
original Godzilla. I actually forgot. I'll get to the other movie that they were playing in a second, but I actually forgot that they do watch the original Godzilla, which was kind of surprising.
It's kind of a recap, I guess.
They recap the original, and they don't change a thing about it aside from they don't call him Godzilla, of course. But I was surprised. I thought they had totally re-edited that scene to have no mention of the original Godzilla.
It's really weird, though. But they did that because, again, they didn't market it as a sequel to the original Godzilla, but they still referenced the events of the original
Sarazawa, the Oxygen Destroyer, it's all there. But yeah, there's another movie
I've seen the Japanese version of this movie a long time ago, and I remember in that scene, in the American version, they have narration to go along with that footage, but in the Japanese version, they just let it play, and it's just silence for 10 minutes.
It's kind of got an interesting sort of creepiness to it, where you just kind of hear the film reel going while you see Godzilla destroying stuff. But it's kind of boring. But the other film that they show stock footage from, I asked my buddy online, who he's way more into obscure monster movies than I am, and so I asked him there's these scenes of these anorexic Ceratosaurus in the desert, and I was wondering what movie those are from. He says that they're from Unknown Island from 1948. So that's what, because I had seen those. I remember seeing that particular scene. What movie is that from? So
yeah,
there's that.
I think they also show a clip from The Lost World as well.
Yes. There's
stop motion. You see stop motion brontosaurus.
Is there a stop motion brontosaurus? There might have been.
I think it's a brontosaurus.
But there's also generic lizard or Slurposaurus, ones with the fins on them and stuff. And they're those weird puppet scenes where you've got weird little puppets coming out of pits.
Yeah.
I think those might have been originally done for this film. I have no idea where those might have come from because they're so poorly done. But that's one.
I'd be surprised if Jack Warner was putting down money for filming scenes of that. I don't know if you ever read about Jack Warner, but that guy was a piece of work. You
don't think he would have bought a pile of sand, leaves, some dry ice, string, and a dinosaur toy?
No.
So yeah, and then the opening continues with just exposition, inner monologue for pretty much the rest of the film, and it is very annoying. And
very repetitive.
Very repetitive, and it is literally stating what is happening on screen. I look out my window at my friend Kobayashi, who has landed his plane in the water. He is on the island, waving at me.
Rodan also did that as well.
Yeah.
The American version of Rodan.
Unfortunately, I have only seen... No, I have seen the Japanese version of Rodan. It's Gargantuas that I've only seen the American version for, because that's another one that's super hard to find physically nowadays.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. But,
damn classic media.
Those dirtbags at Criterion won't give me my dang Rodan Gargantua combo pack. Maybe in 2 years for the anniversary, but,
Don't put your hopes in it.
Yeah, what do you think of the voice acting, though?
It's not very good voice acting. Well, I mean, one of the voice actors that got in here is Paul Frees, who is a very prolific voice actor from back then.
Mm-hmm.
You hear his voice in all sorts of stuff, and he's probably the best voice in this. But it doesn't. That's with a lot of Godzilla movies. When they dubbed it, they don't lip sync it well.
Yeah. Well,
there's some very odd lines.
Well, they did try because they couldn't get, what was it like? I think it was like Baka no, and so they're like, what do we do? Banana oil.
Banana oil.
The greatest line.
It's actually an in-joke with a friend of mine.
The greatest line in the Godzilla franchise.
Or just banana oil.
So
You stupid fool.
So you're somewhat familiar with the cast of this movie. I'm curious, like, what percentage are like actual like Japanese, and what percentage are like, the white guys that they could just get a hold of? Because I'm curious on that.
They just listed those 3 actors: George Takei and Paul Frees.
Is Paul Frees an American guy, or is
he's an American guy?
Okay, so yeah, that's what I was kind of wondering, because it's like some of these, it's like they're kind of putting on these, like, I don't know, a little bit dated accents, but then you have the girls who it's just like, I'm pretty sure that those are just like,
yeah, that's probably
normal American women. Just, they're not even putting on an accent.
Yeah, they don't really care. I mean, this is kind of like the attitude they probably had towards these movies at the time.
Yeah. Just get it out there, get it in the theaters. Let's make a quick buck off this movie that somebody else made.
Yeah. Paul Frees, he probably would have done the majority of voices, because he had very good range.
Okay.
So,
Okay. So yeah. What are some good qualities, though, about maybe not just Gigantis Fire Monster, but about
about the movie itself?
The movie itself, I would say. What are some good things about it? I can name a couple good things.
Well, I guess this is kind of a legacy thing, really, because this is the first movie where Godzilla fights another monster, and that had a very strong legacy, because that's a tradition nowadays, although they haven't done it in the Japanese films for a while.
No.
And the American films, that's all they.
That's all the American films are.
But so it has like an interesting legacy. Also, this movie marks the first appearance of Anguirus, which is one of my favorite Godzilla monsters.
Yeah.
Monster co-stars.
It's
kind of sad that he's the monster Godzilla has to kill in this thing, because
they become buddies later on.
Yeah, and I like Anguirus. It makes me sad to see him get pummeled, get
absolutely obliterated. Yeah,
like Godzilla bites his neck like a vampire or something. Like, oh my god! And I will never forgive him for this. Is throughout the entire movie they replace, because Godzilla is not Godzilla but Gigantis. They replaced the iconic Godzilla roar with Anguirus's roar.
Yeah, and
I remember when I first watched I watched this version first when I was a kid.
I did too.
And I was so confused why they were calling Godzilla Gigantis and why he sounded like Anguirus. It confused the hell out of me.
It almost sounds like Godzilla isn't he's makes these grunts. They sometimes keep Godzilla grunts from the original in, but it just seems like Anguirus is the only one roaring during the entire film.
It's so weird. Is there any other positive points about the movie?
Well,
anything at all?
I have written down here that this film made me realize how good some of the original scenes are. Maybe because they were so bad in the.
I'm not as familiar with the Japanese version,
but
again, I probably only watched the Japanese version on TCM late at night a couple years ago. So.
but the scene where there's like the ball and the main dude and his girlfriend are dancing and it's all nice and happy, and then suddenly you got and then this calm like woman voice tells everybody to evacuate, and then they all panic out of the building, lights go off. The entire blackout scene is, I would say, the best scene in this entire film.
In the original version?
Yeah, I think it's still...
Is it cut down in the...
It's cut down in the American version, I think.
I don't really remember that much.
Yeah, they don't even acknowledge the blackout plan.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it's cut down a lot in this version, but it still, like, keeps certain parts of it. But, yeah, in the original...
If I recall, in the blackout plan, I think that's something they got from... They took inspiration from World War II. That's something that they did. They blacked out the cities, so...
Mm-hmm.
There wouldn't be any
bombers couldn't
anything.
see him. That makes sense. But yeah, it like the lights. Like Godzilla's mad because of the atomic bomb, so he's like attracted to lights. That was sort of the idea of the plan. And so that blackout scene is really cool. And just like Godzilla's head slowly rising out of the water, as you've got kind of this creepy, ominous music, which is in the American version. I just think that's a.
It's not the same score.
I think that particular scene is the same score.
Okay.
Like, yeah, they do change.
It sounds like because the score they have in the American version sounds like library music.
The dun dun or
that
the opening.
It just sounds like they just took some stock.
I kind of dig the opening theme. Yeah, I think the original isn't too spectacular either, but it's fine. But yeah, the blackout scene is really good. And then there are the monster just like designs. I really like this Anguirus suit, the Godzilla suit. I know I say this. Anguirus is one of my favorite monsters. You don't like this guy?
I do not like the original Anguirus suit. I think it looks. Both suits look. Considering they had to rush that out really fast,
they look halved.
Yeah, and. Especially Godzilla. I really love the Godzilla design from the original movie because it's like he looks like something that crawled out of a bomb blast or something like that. But this version looks like he just got out of like rehab or something like that.
He's very skinny.
They had to slim him down because the original suit weighed
so
like
big,
200 pounds, and they probably wanted to give Haru Nakajima a break.
I personally dig both the suits, especially the Anguirus suit. I would say that this is probably my favorite Anguirus design.
No, I don't.
You don't like it?
He looks too rough for me. My favorite.
I like
Anguirus,
how pointy he is, like his back is.
My favorite Anguirus suit is probably the Destroy All Monsters one.
That's the classic
one for me.
That's a very well-rounded, definitive Anguirus, I would say, is
Yeah.
the Destroy All Monsters Anguirus. But what do you think of those sped-up fight scenes?
Okay, so the original film, there's a bit of a challenge trying to make a guy in a rubber suit seem like this large, massive thing, and they do a good job in the first film. They shoot him from a low angle. They have like slowed camera speeds. This version, though, it's like sped up really fast.
So what happened is one of the camera guys jacked up, and he sped it up instead of slowing it down or whatever. But Tsuburaya saw it, and he's like, "Oh my gosh, it's awesome!" And so they kept it in. But no, it's really quite weird looking. And I also don't like the fact, I can't remember how much, it's been a few days since I saw the Gigantis, the fire monster, and I typically watch the original if I do watch this film. So I can't remember how much of the puppets are in this film, but for how much there is of Godzilla and Anguirus suits going at it, there's quite a bit of just these hand puppets going at it, and it's very silly. Like, I can take these Godzilla movies more than most people can. Like silly effects.
Yeah.
But those
that's part of the appeal.
Yeah,
Come on.
but those hand puppets just like fighting each other is really silly.
Yeah.
The original.
There's a part in King Kong versus Godzilla, the original.
Oh yeah.
Where there's a part where they look like they're hand puppets or something like that.
Like, I can take the original Godzilla's hand puppet. It's not a great looking puppet, but I think that one.
I think it works.
It works. Here though, these hand puppets do not work. They look very silly, especially when they're fighting, and it looks like a dude who's got two puppets, one on each hand, and he's like biting each other. And
honestly, the effects in this movie look like the so-called fake Godzilla effects that everybody makes fun of. Like, this is kind of like the stereotypical. Like,
yeah, this definitely not as.
Of course, I can't say for certain whether or not this is where that stereotypical idea, because debatably it was never shown on television or whatever.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot.
Yeah, I'm sure this movie was not, was probably kind of pushed to the side.
Well, because of that Gigantis thing, it
Yeah.
kind of like unintentionally distanced itself away from the other Godzilla movies.
But then there's the fact, now this is not a positive, I was going on positive, now this is not a positive, is the fact that the fight scene is the midway point in the film.
Yeah. Most Godzilla movies, there's like, you get like two fights. Or
yeah,
something.
you might get a fight in the middle, or some sort of Godzilla scene, or like a giant destruction
it's
scene.
the climax in the movie.
And then
Here, it's just the middle of the movie they fight.
This movie is so poorly structured because then after this big epic battle, the climax of the film, you get like 20 minutes of just this,
of them just burying Godzilla in the ice.
Well, that comes at like the last 10 minutes. But then before that, you've got the 20 minutes of them partying, worrying about what they're supposed to do about the fishing building. There's a subplot about this one guy who's trying to find a wife. It is just
Kobayashi.
Yeah, Kobayashi.
Yo.
Oh my gosh, his
voice in the American version
is pretty atrocious.
Yo.
Yeah,
it sounds like Goofy.
Yeah. Oh man, but yeah, this is a knock on the original as well. It's just how poorly structured this film is, and then you go and add a bunch of unnecessary stock footage, and it makes for an even worse experience. And yeah, they probably cut down on the blackout scene, which is by far the best scene in the whole film.
And then the climax is basically them burying Godzilla in the ice.
Yeah,
which goes on for a long time. In fact, I remember when I rewatched this movie a couple years ago. For some reason I misremembered it when I was a kid. I thought that when Kobayashi crashes in the ice,
that it like instantly ends, or like it goes down and then it pretty much ends.
Yeah, it goes down. The ice covers up Godzilla.
They go back to the base. They're like, let's Kobayashi sacrifice himself. Quick, let's get the missiles, and then they go and they defeat him.
Yeah.
This is a dreadful film to watch. It's not one of the worst films I've ever seen, but
yeah, it's not good. And the American version doesn't make it any better.
No, the American version is atrocious. If you can watch the movie, watch the original. Did you watch the classic media version, right? Yeah, this is my classic media version. So it pops up as Godzilla Raids Again on the title, but really, that's the only
which is funny. Yeah, they changed the title card. Like originally it said Gigantis the Fire Monster, but when they released it on DVD, they redid it. But the title card that they added in looks like they got it from like Adobe Premiere or something.
They're like, oh my gosh, we can't do Gigantis the Fire Monster. Quick, throw on.
You see, and that's probably why it confused me so much as a kid. It just said Godzilla Raids Again. I was like,
it's Godzilla, and then Gigantis the Fire Monster. It's like, what?
Yeah.
At least they totally acknowledged the original. That is still getting to me because I've totally forgot the fact that
I still find that weird that they did acknowledge the original.
Did acknowledge the original, even when it seemed like they were going to just totally ignore it with all the dinosaur footage, and then like, oh yeah, and then
a couple months ago
we had one attack Tokyo.
Which, why would they need a recap of the movie if they experienced it several months ago?
Yeah, and there was this guy named Dr. Sarazawa. Don't you guys remember him from Godzilla King of the Monsters and his oxygen destroyer? Like, they could. I'm surprised that they didn't rename him anything else. They didn't just called it oxygen destroyer, anything else. Like, I don't even think they're matching anybody's lip movements for that.
No,
they are literally just.
It's just like, it was
just laziness. Like, I don't care. It's
Jack
supposed to be.
Just wanted to pump it out. Basically.
Yeah.
How ironic that this movie was made by Warner Brothers, who later made the Legendary Pictures Godzilla.
This is their.
It's very coincidental,
Yeah.
Wow,
we managed to stay on topic for most of the video.
Yeah.
For most of the podcast.
I guess we don't really have much to say about Gigantis the Fire Monster.
No, nothing that really makes us want to go off topic, at least.
Yeah, this movie is... It's not very good. I mean, the original Godzilla Raids Again is also not very good.
Yeah, already not a good film.
But this, like, the American version, it's not that great either.
Yeah,
but
it is an atrocious film. I don't know why you made me watch this film.
well, because I was like, I needed something, and I thought, oh, Gigantis the fire monster. That'd be something.
Yeah, no, this was. Yeah.
Hey, here's a plot. Here's a fact I read in a book once.
Mm-hmm.
I have the Encyclopedia Monster.
Yeah.
I showed you that book.
Mm-hmm.
They list Godzilla and Gigantis as two separate monsters.
That's awesome.
And they mention in the movie, at the end of the movie, Gigantis gets encased in an iceberg where he won't escape again until Godzilla versus King Kong, meaning that every Godzilla appearance since this movie is Gigantis.
Well, at least until Terror of Mechagodzilla, but yeah.
Yeah, I guess. What rating would you give Gigantis?
1 or 2? I give it a 2. It's not 1 worthy, but it's a 2.
I give this movie a solid 9 out of 10.
No, you don't.
Okay, no, I give the movie the same rating too.
Yeah, 2. Yeah, it's not.
Yeah.
It's not the worst thing ever. I think
there's better usage of your time.
Yeah, I think the worst movies are just like boring movies. This
movie is kind of boring.
It's a little boring, but there are some entertaining moments here and there. It gets really boring in the second after Godzilla's killed Anguirus.
Yeah.
But I'd say the first half is enjoyable.
Yeah, there's better in terms of Japanese monster movies. There's better movies to watch. In terms of 50s monster movies, there's better films to watch. So, not a recommend.
Not a recommend. No, this movie sucks. Unless you're like a Godzilla completionist or something, or are like really anti subtitles and you want to watch all the Godzilla movies. It's like, all right, I guess you get to deal with Gigantis the fire monster. It's your punishment for not being able to read.
If you can find it.
Gigantis the fire monster is hard to find.
Well, yeah, it wasn't on the Criterion Blu-ray.
Yeah, it was. It wasn't.
I don't think it was.
Well, I don't have that because that's expensive. But I know that they got the Japanese version of King Kong vs. Godzilla, which is.
Yeah, I feel like that was a fluke though because it was on the bonus features.
Oh well, that's still
Blu-ray
that's still the same.
I don't have that either because it's expensive.
I have that because I got it on a bootleg of it for like $15.
All right. Well, that's it for this episode. Join us next time where we review something we haven't decided yet. Ooh. Goodbye.